Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, as always, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the Quaker State 400 at Atlanta Motor Speedway here on Running Hot. Last weekend's race on the streets of Chicago was absolutely an historic event. After braving a brutal rainstorm, I should say, all weekend, the race finally got underway, starting off in wet conditions, but of course it was dry by the end of the race. And Shane Van Gisbergen took advantage of some strategy, a shortened race distance to win over Justin Haley and Chase Elliott in Van Gisbergen's NASCAR Cup Series debut. It's incredible. It's the first time in over 60 years that a driver won on their debut. He did it for Team Trackhouse's Project 91. Stevie, I don't think we can say enough about that accomplishment, but also I thought it was a very good race. What did you think?
I think they knocked it out of the park. It's baseball season. They hit a home run. I am still in the I think it should move to a different city every year phase, but dude, I can't tell you how nervous, I think nervous is the right word. Nervous I was for NASCAR, the sport and everything, and then starting on wet tires. I was like, man, this is going to be awful. It was awesome. The drivers did a phenomenal job. NASCAR making the call to go single file, amazing call. We're not here to watch, 10 cars go into turn one and wreck. It was just all in all, I know a lot of people were upset about the Xfinity decision. I think they made the right call there. I feel like they made all of the right calls all weekend long. And the race was phenomenal. SVG, man, like he came over here and he showed these boys what's up. So, I don't think anyone understands just how hard it is to come into a cup car for the first time ever and go win your race, especially nowadays. Like, it's incredible what he did, and he didn't do it by luck. He was one of a few drivers to be able to drive through the field by passing and using braking zones, and just his way that he was racing was just so much different than everybody else's with the clutch. So, Congratulations to him. But honestly, congratulations to NASCAR. The Chicago street race was a home run. It was very successful, and it was awesome. The ratings and the viewers, they tell us everything, and everybody wanted to watch this. And dude, my dad, he fast forwards through races nowadays. He's like, man, I watched every lap.
Nice.
So it was a good event, and kudos to NASCAR for just being willing to do it. I know you're an IndyCar guy. I like F1. It was really cool to see cup cars on a street course.
Yeah, I agree. It was great to see cup cars on a street course. It was great to see all the decisions NASCAR made. They had to shorten the race. It was going to be too dark to go much beyond 75 laps. So the right call there. Like you said, the right call to go single file, the right call to start on wets when they did. And then it dried up, and they made, like you said, all the right calls all weekend. And even the racing we saw, even the calls that they saw, we see it in other series. IndyCar, sometimes they have to shorten races because of time limits, or if they get started really late because of darkness. Same thing with single file restarts in the wet. That's just something that IndyCar sometimes does as well. NASCAR made the right call there. We saw, kind of a traffic jam at one point where the whole track got blocked. We see that in other series as well. So, NASCAR put like a true street course show on, and I thought it was great. I loved every moment of Chicago. But that is our Chicago review. Now it's time for our Atlanta preview. And yes, NASCAR is making its return to Atlanta Motor Speedway, making this the first track that the series will be visiting twice so far this year. Earlier this year at Atlanta, Joey Logano bested his former teammate, Team Penske teammate, Brad Keselowski, who is now, of course, co-owner of Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing, to lead a Ford 1-2 finish over Christopher Bell, the Toyota, in third. All told, it was a Ford-dominated race. They led 85% of the laps in the first Atlanta race this year. So, Stevie, my questions to you. One, should we expect more of the same, more of the Ford dominance? Or two, Do you think other manufacturers catch up? And how will this race maybe be a little different from the first Atlanta race?
Well, we know the Fords definitely benefit with the speedway type racing with their new nose. It's been a fact now that we've seen. But I think the one thing that we really got to remember about the first Atlanta race, I was there. It was 40 degrees. 40-degree weather is always going to help the Fords. You know, you've talked about all year when we get into these night conditions or cooler conditions, how the Fords are not going to have as much fall off as they do in the hot conditions. So it's going to be 85 on when this race gets going. So it's going to cool down as the race goes, but it's not going to be 40. It's not going to be 50. So I think one thing we need to just keep in the back of our heads is the temperature. The temperature is definitely going to affect this race a little bit more than it does early in the year, because I mean, it's Georgia, it's Atlanta, man, it's right outside of Atlanta. So the weather is going to be, it's Hotlanta, like we talk about it in baseball so much right now. So do I think the Fords still have an advantage? I do. I think the nose still helps them, but I think the Chevys and the Toyotas are going to be a lot more competitive than they were in the first race of the year.
Yeah, you bring up some great points because even though this is going to be a race that ends at night, that first race was in the day and it was very cold. So, of course, the cool air helps the Fords. It's just more dense, so that helps with their downforce. And because they already have that slimmed up nose, their downforce is reduced, but their drag is reduced. So getting that little bit of extra downforce in the cooler temps will always help the Fords. Same thing, though, in night conditions. This, like you said, this race is going to start evening, but then it's go into full nighttime conditions. And I still think because we won't have the sun beating down on the track, that's still going to help the Fords. Hot Atlanta, like you said, it's also humid Atlanta. So again, just more air density to help the Fords there. So I do think the Fords will still be the dominant team, but all those other teams also had a chance to learn from the first race. And something else that wasn't in the first race. It's a driver named Chase Elliott, who has dominated this race in the past. He actually dominated this very race last year, ended up winning, putting a little block move on Corey LaJoie there at the end to take home that win and make sure Corey LaJoie didn't steal that one. Do you think Chase Elliott factors into this one, knowing he wasn't in that first one? And you know, do you think there will just be a little bit of a shakeup simply because all the teams are returning and now they've had a race to kind of look at things?
I remember that Josh Berry was actually really fast in the race here earlier this year, and he was driving through the field really finally starting to figure it out before he got caught up in a wreck. So yes, I do think Chase Elliott's going to be fast, and as fast as like the Fords were last or earlier this year. I mean, if you look at like green flag speed, the top 5 cars were Chevys or Toyotas, so they had speed, they just couldn't. They couldn't bump draft and use the draft as much generate as much drag as the Fords. So yes, I do think that this is a race that like we have to expect Chase Elliott to be good. He's been really good here. He's a really good super speedway racer in general. And I mean, Hendrick won both races here last year. Byron won the first race and Chase Elliott won the second race. And, you know, just because we look at one race where Ford was really good, we can't forget about, you know, 2 other races, because not much has changed. A little has changed, but I mean, Atlanta now with this speedway type of racing, you got to benefit, in my opinion, you got to benefit the aggressive drivers and the drivers that are good at drafting, and blocking, you know, the reason that Logano won the race earlier this year is because Ryan Blaney gave it to him. I mean, he just didn't block him as well as he should have. So, yeah, I mean, I think, or Keselowski. It was Keselowski. It wasn't Blaney, but yeah, Keselowski didn't block Logano. It was interesting because like Keselowski's a really good blocker and he didn't put an aggressive block down. I don't know, maybe respect. I don't know, but Keselowski should have won that race. So anyway. But to your question, I do think Chase Elliott is in play this week. I think the books have Chase Elliott overpriced on the betting side of things.
Yeah.
It's a super speedway race, and no one should be as big a favorite as Chase Elliott is this week.
Yeah, that's right. You mentioned it is a super speedway race. I always call it the pseudo speedway because it is a 1.5 mile drafting race. So we don't quite get the same speeds. We also don't have the same track width as we have at something like a Talladega. But handling comes into play here as well. It's really interesting. It is a pretty decent blend of a mile and a half plus a drafting race. So it's a really interesting style of racing here at Atlanta Motor Speedway. But it is time to dive into some bets. As always, we're going to take you for a lap around Atlanta. That's 4 turns, 1 pick from each of us per turn before we drive into victory lane. So we're taking the green flag and we're diving right into turn 1. All right, Stevie, we've taken the green flag. I'm going to bump draft you here into turn 1. Get us started.
Hey, we're at I like how you called it, but we're at a speedway race. So top 10s are my go-to on these types of races. So we're going to start with a top 10 that I really like. Daniel Suarez, top 10, plus 180 over there on BetMGM. Suarez is someone that is very aggressive. And we just got done talking about how we like aggressive drivers at this type of racetrack. He's someone that ranks inside the top 15 in speed this season. He ranks 12th. He has 2 top 10 finishes in 3 races at Atlanta with the new car, dating back to last year. So, I mean, just looking at all the stats, there's no reason that he should be plus 180 for a top 10. So, seeing this go anywhere from like plus 120 to plus 150. So, getting this at plus 180 at BetMGM seems like nice value. So, one of the bets that I'm jumping on early this week is Daniel Suarez top 10 plus 180.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because, and I wrote about this in my article that I wrote up at Action Network this week, previewing this race. The top 10s are super interesting this week because normally at these tracks, we see the top 10 value towards the back half of the field. If we look at this race, exactly this race last year, guys like Harrison Burton, Todd Gilliland, Cole Custer, Noah Gragson, Corey LaJoie, we're all 7.5 or 8 to 1 or longer for a top 10. Now they're all 3 to 1 or shorter. And what that has done is it's opened the top 10 value up towards the top of the odd board. So now guys like Daniel Suarez, I think you're going to talk about another one here in a little bit, are opened up as value, whereas maybe last year they would have been priced around plus 125, plus 150, something a little less palatable. But now, because they've taken away those odds from those longer shot guys, if they don't want to hold like 50-60%, they got to push these guys towards the top of the board a little bit longer. And so you're right. I think it's good to target that value toward the top of the board. Daniel Suarez top 10, like that pick. For me, what I think it's done is it's also opened up top 5 value because those guys at the back have shortened up as well. So I'm going to go for turn 1. I'm going to take Eric Almirola top 5 at 5 to 1 at BetMGM. And it's funny. I was going to make this my running hot pick number 1. And then I saw our good friend Greg Mathern track this pick. He got it at plus 550, but so we're on the same wavelength here. Eric Almirola is just really good at these super speedway races. He's just the guy that knows how to get it done here. He led 17 laps in the first Atlanta race this year, had track position for a lot of the race. And he's a guy that's capable of leading laps and winning at these races. And for him to be 5 to 1, that's just far too long. My model actually has fair odds at this around plus 375 on Eric Almirola. So we're getting really big value here on Eric Almirola's top 5 finish.
Yeah, he was leading the race earlier this year and had a tire go down, leading the race. So they were very aggressive with their pit strategy. And honestly, if you think about it, they're probably the last 2 chances for Almirola to win with the Stewart-Haas speed this year is this race and Daytona right before the playoffs starts. So if you're Eric Almirola and you're his crew chief and you're this whole team, like you have this one circled. So I don't mind this.
Yeah, for sure. So that is turn 1, and we're going to continue on into turn 2. All right, Stevie, sounds like you got another top 10 pick here for us in turn 2.
Listen, you just got done talking about how we have a little bit of value at the top. This is one of them, man. William Byron, top 10, plus 110. Nick, had I told you on Monday before these lines came out that William Byron is going to have a plus number with a top 10, you would have smacked me and told me I was silly. He's finished. I mean, he won this race last year, the first race that we went to Atlanta with the new car. And he's finished 30th and 32nd in the other 2 races. Well, it wasn't because of speed. He got caught up in stuff. If we take out those wrecks, he's really good at super speedways. So he's a guy that ranks first in speed this season. So using Atlanta, I definitely look at like speedway type data. But I also want to know who's been fast this year because this is a hybrid super speedway. It's a 1.5, like you mentioned, So knowing that he's been the fastest car this year, he's too good this season. This is nice value. This line is anywhere from -120 to -140. Jump on this one. +110 for a top 10 for William Byron is insane value.
Yeah, I absolutely would have smacked you if you told me he'd be plus money, especially +110, not even +105, +110. That's absolutely crazy. And I am with you on this pick. William Byron, top 10, +110. I'm going to be right there with you on this one, Stevie. For my turn to pick, I'm going to go to the bet that I wrote up at Action Network. It, for some reason, hasn't moved, so I could still give it out on Running Hot. But that is Chris Buescher, top 5 finish, +325 at BetMGM. I really like this one. I can't believe it's +325. I still can't believe it's +325. It's just too much of a crazy value. Go read my article up at actionnetwork.com. I did track it in the Action Network app, so make sure you're following both Stevie and myself in the Action Network app. But if we just look at Chris Buescher's finishes, he has in 17 starts with RFK Racing 4 top 5s. So that's 4 out of 17, but he has 3 6th place finishes. I mean, those are like right on the cusp of top 5 finishes. If we say that's like, basically a coin flip to get in or out of the top 5 on those. Let's say it's another 1.5. So he has 5.5 top 5 finishes in 17 starts. It doesn't exactly work like that, but it's kind of statistically similar. That would be about a 33%, 32.5%, top 5 rate here. And that's much good enough to be better than +325 if that was his long-term average. I also did some other statistical stuff with distributions based off all his finishes, yada, yada, yada. The point is my model has +305 as fair value on this bet. And I still think that's actually too long that my model is giving out because of how good the Fords were at this first race earlier this year. If they're still much better than the field, then I think it should be even less than +305. But bottom line, +325 for Chris Buescher, top 5 finish. I think that's just too long.
Yeah, I mean, there was days that we were getting really good value on him being top 10, and he's such a good speedway racer now that we're not getting that value anymore. But this is nice. I like this at 325. Buescher is someone that can win this race. Like, he has that type of upside. Like, if he was in little bit of better equipment, I think Buescher would have a couple wins already this year. If Ford can figure it out, he's one of the most talented guys in the garage. And if you ask a lot of drivers, they'll tell you the same thing. So I like Buescher at a top 10-5 here. Top 5, not top 10.
Yeah, and the other thing, I totally agree with you on his talent as well and the equipment. But he has only led double-digit laps at super speedway races twice in his career. So I really like, instead of having to take him to win, I like that cushion of being able to have 4 extra spots in addition to first place as well. But that is turn 2. Now we're going to head down Atlanta's back stretch and dive into turn 3. All right, Stevie, what do you got for us in turn 3?
I go with a head-to-head. I don't love head-to-heads on speedways, but this one just jumped off the page to me a little bit when we're just looking at experience. Bubba Wallace over Ty Gibbs. It's -115 over there on BetMGM. Wallace is a top 5 speedway racer in the Cup Series. You can't argue it. He has been phenomenal on these types of tracks. Gibbs finished 9th here earlier this year. Wallace's best finish is 13th. I'm not worried about that. I'm looking at just pure experience on this type of racetrack. I have Wallace as a heavy favorite in this matchup on my model. And I like the fact that he's aggressive. May he wreck? Sure. But he's going to be someone that tries to run to the front. This is the type of car and the type of track has changed this car where you have to have track position on speedways now. So you have to have aggressive drivers that are running up towards the front. You can't be running 30th with 5 laps to go and win a race anymore with this car. So really like Bubba Wallace over Ty Gibbs. Going to pay the juice a little bit here and take the experience over the rookie.
Yeah, I'm 100% right there with you on this head-to-head, but also on my turn 3 pick. It's the Bubba Wallace turn. 2 picks in turn 3 on Bubba, 2-3. So it's definitely his turn, number 23 of Bubba Wallace. And so for me, I'm taking him top Toyota at 6-1. 6-1. That's crazy for Bubba Wallace at a super speedway. I mean, you just mentioned he's a top 5 super speedway racer in the whole Cup Series. Well, there's only 6 Toyotas. So, I mean, he's better than Ty Gibbs at super speedways. He's better than Martin Truex Jr. at super speedways. He's better than Tyler Reddick at super speedways. So that only leaves potentially Denny Hamlin, and Christopher Bell's been really good at Atlanta, specifically, especially as like the three other Toyotas. So, if there's 6 Toyotas, fair odds, if all of them were identically equal, would be 5-1. Well, he's 6-1, so they're saying he's worse than the average Toyota. There's no way he's worse than the average Toyota. He should be like plus 300 or something like that to be top Toyota. This line is absolutely absurd. So go grab Bubba Wallace, top Toyota plus 600. That line makes no sense. So just take it. Don't even think twice.
Yeah. I would have him probably second as far as like speedway guys you're just not putting anybody above Denny when it comes. He's probably him, Logano, and Blaney are probably the 3 best when it comes to this type of racetrack. And Bubba's in the conversation. He's just not as good as Denny at this. And he gets to learn from Denny, and he's really kind of sponged to Denny, it seems like. But yeah, I love this bet. 6-1. You mentioned it, like, if we give everybody an average, it's 5-1. Why is he below average when he's definitely top 3? So there's only 6 of them.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. You don't even need advanced statistics or models for this. It's just one that just stands out. So go grab Bubba Wallace, top Toyota, 6-1. I like him all the way down to maybe just a bit over 3-1. So that is turn 3. We got one more turn left before we go into victory lane. So that is turn 4. All right, Stevie, final turn. Lead us in there.
Yeah, so coming into the race, again, like, I'm thinking that the Fords are going to be a little bit worse this weekend. So I'm going race winning manufacturer Chevy at plus 125 on BetMGM. Chevy has won 2 of the 3 races here at Atlanta with the new car. The first Atlanta race this season, it was in the 40s, like I mentioned. It really benefited the Fords. It's going to be much hotter this weekend, which should benefit the Chevys. Chevy has 6 of the top 10 cars in speed this season. Chevy, almost every week when we're looking at early weeks odds, you're paying juice for them to win a race. And the fact that you're not paying juice this week is more speedway racing, but Atlanta definitely, speed matters. And when we're looking at how fast Chase has been here, how fast Chastain has been here, how fast William Byron has been here, how fast they've been this season, it's hard for me not to say Chevy wins this race.
Yeah, they have a lot of Chevys on the track as well, and car count at these races really matters. So, there's only 6 Toyotas, as we talked about, for the top Toyota market. That's going to make it hard for Toyota to win, and they're pretty short. I've seen them around plus 300, give or take a little bit, which it just feels too short almost for a 6-car group, especially when Ford dominated earlier this year, and Chevy has been the dominant manufacturer overall this year. So it's one of those where I like the Chevy bet here. I also think maybe you could just bet Chevy and Ford both at plus money and just sweat not having 6 cars and make a profit if either one of them hits. Size your bet right as well, so that you can make maybe around a unit and a half if one or the other, or sorry, around half a unit if one or the other hits. But or just pick one, take the Chevy as Stevie is doing here. But I think that car count just hurts the Toyotas too much, especially I like Ty Gibbs and all, but I don't think he's gonna win. So you really got to reduce it almost to like 5.5 cars or something like that, as far as the Toyotas that are capable of winning. So definitely a Chevy race or a Ford race, in my opinion. Doesn't mean Toyota can't win. It's just going to be very hard for them to win. For my turn 4 pick, I am going to take a Ford, though, and I am going to take Austin Cindric to top his group. That is a 4-car group with him, Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, and Chris Buescher. So I did talk about Buescher earlier. I like him. He's actually second longest in this group as well. If you want to do kind of what we did last week in that McDowell Hamlin group, where that hit, if you took both McDowell and Hamlin, I forget which one of those 2 won. I think it was McDowell, but he won that group. This week you could take Cindric and Buescher, and I really like that. Now, Larson, he's just not the best super speedway racer. He's gotten better, but he's still not the best. And Christopher Bell's fine. He's very good. But we did see the Fords had the advantage earlier this year. In that first race at Atlanta, Austin Cindric actually won stage 2. He finished 3rd in this exact Atlanta race last year. He's the Daytona 500 winner from last year. So we know he's pretty good at these drafting tracks. He was right in it in that Daytona cutoff race last year, which all hell broke loose in that race. So it doesn't really kind of count, but the guy knows how to at least survive and finish it up front at some of these. And he's in a really good car. Those Team Penske cars are so good at super speedways. So, if you want to back the Fords in this group, I wouldn't hate that, but I really like backing Austin Cindric. Again, if fair odds, if everything were perfectly equal, fair odds would be 3-1. You can't tell me Cindric isn't at least around average in this group. So I'm seeing some value here on Austin Cindric at 4-1.
I mean, definitely benefits from having two teammates that are very good at drafting and bumping. And they do tend to hook up and work together. So the Toyotas, they don't ever seem to group up and work together as well as the Fords and the Chevys. And I mean, numbers obviously matter. But I mean, just looking at this group overall, I definitely don't love Larson for this group. While I do think that Atlanta is a different type of speedway, Larson's just not that good, and he's admitted it many, many, many times. So I do think this comes down to a 3 type of group bet. So I don't mind Cindric in this one.
Yeah, so that is a lap around Atlanta Motor Speedway. So there is only one thing left to do, Stevie. You know what that is. We got to drive into victory lane, buddy. So hit us with the victory lane pick.
Felt so good about our victory lane pick last week. And then the rain happened.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, was feeling good. Ross Chastain, top 5 plus 300 over on BetMGM. Nick has talked about how some of these top 5 odds have really kind of played into our favor. He's finished second in 2 of the last 3 Atlanta races. He's very aggressive, and unlike the old car, track position matters at super speedway racing now. So with track positioning mattering so much, I want the aggressive guys. And Chastain is one of, if not the most aggressive driver in the field. So I like this because if he doesn't wreck, I think he's in the contention to win the race. If he does wreck, you don't win bets. So, I mean, taking variance out of it and just looking at speed and aggressiveness, this guy has been one of the, if not the best driver when it comes to Atlanta with the new car. So when looking at overall speed, I think Chastain is a top 5 guy. Getting him at 3-1 for a top 5 just seems like a really nice bet here on a speedway. So victory lane is Chastain top 5 plus 300 on BetMGM.
Yeah, this one's super interesting because, you started off with he's finished second in 2 of the 3 Atlanta races. They were both the races last year. And I didn't even remember that until you kind of put it in our outline here. And I'm like, really? And you're right. He finished second in 2 of the last 3 Atlanta races. It just seems so quiet because, Chase Elliott dominated the second race and William Byron dominated the first Atlanta race. But Ross Chastain led a good chunk of laps at both of those races. He led 36, I think it was, at the second race. And at the first race, he led 42. He actually even had a tire issue. I think he went like a lap down or 2 at one point and came back and finished second. So, that was a really good race for Ross Chastain, that first Atlanta race last year, just having to come back from that tire issue. So, leading at least 36 laps in both of these races, that's pretty stout for those 2 races last year. Now, he didn't earlier this year, but you mentioned he's so aggressive. He knows how to run up front. He can find his way toward the front. Ross Chastain, super aggressive at these super speedway races. So I'm with you there. Top 5, 3-1 at BetMGM. So that is going to do it for us. Thank you for listening to the Quaker State 400 episode of Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. We'll be back this time next week to talk about bets for the Crayon 301 at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, the 1-mile flat track that we're going to be going to there up in the Northeast. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you back here next week on Running Hot from Action Network.